Tonight on 24, Washington and Tehran are ready for a new round of talks in Islamabad. The White House is sending Wickoff and Kushner to Pakistan for a possible discussion with Iraqi. Reports indicate Ghalibaf's withdrawal from the negotiating delegation in Islamabad amid ongoing disagreements within the Islamic Republic. Some sources are reporting the possibility of Jalili leading the team.
Non-Iranian vessels are allowed to transit.
And the U.S. Minister of War's warning about intensifying the naval blockade of Iran, coinciding with the presence of 3 aircraft carriers in the region.
From Iran International, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Hello and good day to Iran International viewers in Iran and around the world. According to reports, Donald Trump is sending Steve Wickoff and Jared Kushner to Pakistan for talks with the Islamic Republic's foreign minister. Meanwhile, Abbas Araghchi has also arrived in Islamabad with a small delegation, but based on information received by Iran International, Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf, head of the Islamic Republic's negotiating delegation, has resigned from his position. According to recent diplomatic reports, Ghalibaf was reprimanded for attempting to include this sensitive nuclear issue on the negotiation agenda. As a result, he was forced to step down, and the possibility of Saeed Jalili replacing him has been actively raised. Turning to other news, my colleague Samira Karai has joined us live from the White House. Samira, the White House is currently talking about sending Kushner and Wickoff to Islamabad. While it is true that the Iranian representative Araghchi has also gone to Islamabad, they are maintaining that their intention isn't necessarily to negotiate directly with the Americans, noting that part of the trip is for bilateral meetings.
They're also very insistent on saying that this trip that's happening has nothing to do with negotiations with the United States, and they're defining it within the framework of a regional trip. The trip to Muscat, the trip to Moscow, and Islamabad. Mr. Araghchi himself has also framed all of these on social media X as being done in the direction of cooperation with our neighbors, and our neighbors are a priority for us, and we want to increase regional cooperation. At the beginning, it was also the story of Mr. Araghchi's trip, meaning the news came from Iran that Mr. Araghchi was heading to Islamabad with a small delegation. Now also, based on the news received, the Iranian delegation has arrived in Islamabad on Pakistani soil, and a few hours later, we received confirmation from the United States that Wickoff and Kushner will also be heading to Islamabad tomorrow, Saturday. Ms. Levitt came and spoke here to reporters about an hour ago. This is the last time Fardad is speaking to reporters. Ms. Levitt is going on maternity leave next week and probably won't be around for a few months. And regarding Kushner and Wickoff's trip, she herself made an official announcement. After that, CNN and Axios had reported this news, quoting informed sources. But Ms. Levitt herself said that the Iranian side had contacted Mr. Trump. Furthermore, they have explicitly stated that they are very willing to engage and talk. For this important reason, Mr. Trump has officially sent Mr. Wickoff and Mr. Kushner to Islamabad to travel there and continue the ongoing diplomatic discussions. It is currently planned that Mr. Vance's chief of staff will also participate, along with dedicated teams from the vice president's office. However, Mr. Vance himself will not travel. The primary reason, being stated, is that Mr. Ghalibaf, who is Mr. Vance's direct counterpart, will not be there. Even though Mr. Ghalibaf is the Speaker of the Islamic Consultative Assembly, it's not clear now what connection this has to the American vice president, but overall throughout these negotiations, they are portraying these two people as being on the same level, and for this reason they say Mr. Vance isn't there, but he's sitting ready so that if they see progress has been made in the negotiations, they'll want to send Mr. Vance too. But Miss Levitt, who was giving the news of Kushner and Wickoff going, gave more explanations as to why Mr. Trump made such a decision. Let's go listen.
Look, as you know, and I also talked about it earlier this week, the president showed flexibility for extending the ceasefire. Along these lines, he has decided to send Special Envoy Wickoff and Jared Kushner to Islamabad again. Honestly, the Iranians want to talk, and that too in person. And well, the president, just as I've told all of you many times, is always ready to give diplomacy a chance. So Steve and Jared are heading to Pakistan tomorrow to hear what the Iranians have to say. We hope progress will be made and positive news comes out of this meeting.
Fardad, news about these negotiations and the possibility of a second round of negotiations, while the Islamic Republic says there will be negotiations, is happening at a time when military developments are still continuing in the Middle East, in the southern waters of Iran. This morning, we had a comprehensive briefing and press conference from the Ministry of War, where both Mr. Hext, the Minister of War himself, and General Keane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke. The conference was heavily focused on the ongoing naval blockade in the strategic Strait of Hormuz. They detailed exactly what tactical actions are being taken there, and how the United States has successfully continued this naval blockade so far. Furthermore, they outlined how it plans to continue from here on out. The blockade is supposed to become significantly stronger, wider, and be implemented more strictly. Comprehensive details were provided regarding exactly how one of the Islamic Republic's oil tankers was seized. General Keane offered these explanations, stating that after hours of strict warnings they had given to the crew, they eventually fired at the tanker's engine room to disable it, and then U.S. military forces boarded the vessel. We also had another significant piece of news today from the Wall Street Journal. The report detailed that although one of the Islamic Republic's tankers initially managed to bypass the maritime blockade and escape, temporarily avoiding capture by American forces, U.S. military units tracked the vessel to the western coast of India and were finally able to seize this tanker. This means that what they are doing is not solely focused on localized areas, like, say, the Arabian Sea or the Gulf of Oman. Rather, they are operating much more broadly and extending beyond those waters. At the same time, let me also mention the surprising recent news published today by one of Channel 12 Israel's reporters, stating that the Israeli intelligence community now firmly believes that Mojtaba Khamenei is no longer alive and has lost his life. This suspected death is partly why the news about, Mr. Trump saying that Islamic Republic officials are fighting like cats and dogs perfectly aligns with these intense internal disagreements we're currently hearing about. It's possible that the true source of all this recent instability is Mojtaba Khamenei's death, a critical development which the Israeli intelligence community now firmly believes.
Thank you, my colleague Samira Gareh from the White House, joining us while Pakistanis are hoping that the Iranian and American delegations will meet in Islamabad. Just moments ago, Mike Wall, the U.S. ambassador or permanent representative to the United Nations, reacted to a post by Abbas Araghchi, who had said, on the eve of his trip to Islamabad, our neighbors are our priority. He reacted to him and said, is that really why you've launched thousands of missiles, drones, and other equipment towards countries in the region, their hotels and airports, or not? Hostilities between Tehran and Washington remain very high. On the eve of upcoming negotiations, the IRGC-affiliated Tasnim news agency stated that no talks with the U.S. are currently on the agenda. Furthermore, it clarified that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's trip to Islamabad is not for U.S. negotiations. Instead, he will meet with Pakistani officials solely to discuss the Islamic Republic's considerations regarding ending the war. Jaber Rajabi, political analyst, and Aram Hesami, professor of political science at Montgomery College from Maryland, are with us. Mr. Rajabi, how do you analyze this trip by Araghchi, Wyckoff, and Kushner to Islamabad, especially since the American side seems much more strongly convinced that they will meet with the Iranians, while the Iranian side says no, it's only bilateral meetings?
My endless greetings. What is abundantly clear at this moment, Fardad, is that right now, the atmosphere of intense political competition, and you could certainly say a fierce power struggle within the Islamic Republic, has become very heated. The absolute key to this complex operation and the primary catalyst for this escalating power struggle is precisely these ongoing negotiations. That is exactly why we are really seeing here, I firmly believe, a situation where one powerful faction is deliberately hiding crucial information from another competing group regarding the exact details of the negotiations. Furthermore, it is very clear that even the ceasefire that Trump extended was the direct result of a calculated agreement, meticulous planning, and extensive backroom discussions. What Araghchi says, what Ghalibaf says, and other people like them, it is entirely because of the steep political cost it has for them within their own base. They are catering to that hardcore of power, where only extreme hardliners are left for them to rely upon. For the Islamic Republic today, there is absolutely no one left but these hardliners hardliners. That is exactly why they are really worried about losing them. That's why they can't just speak freely, for example, now, regardless of whether Mujtaba is alive or dead. I strongly believe he is alive. They can't say that the leader they claimed would be an avenging leader whose father was killed and who else was killed would now become a leader of surrender. That's why. And now, someone, I think Mojtaba Khamenei, or the group that is currently. The faction currently governing the country is desperately looking to pin this monumental failure on someone else, refusing to accept the heavy responsibility of this political surrender. That is precisely why we see a constant deflection of blame. For example, Abbas Araghchi is publicly denying it. Another official comes forward with conflicting remarks, and we have even heard rumors that Mohammed Bakr Ghalibaf wants to step aside entirely. All of this chaotic maneuvering is closely related to the undeniable fact that these unfolding events are directly shaping the future of the Islamic Republic. Previously, the regime operated like a unified crew on a ship, believing that if this ship sinks, they all inevitably sink together. They generally prioritize collective survival, but now, as the crisis deepens, their personal political interests have become significantly more prominent, meaning everyone is now worried about their own uncertain future. On one hand, each specific group wants a clear signal. It is quite obvious that even their hardliners, I believe, are quietly trying to open communication lines with the US. Each of them, on one hand, wants to not lose their political future, or even their life in Iran, to not have anything bad happen to them. On the other hand, he also fully understands the current complex situation. That is precisely why we consistently observe such a huge difference between actual reality on the ground and the exaggerated narratives they promote on X or other platforms. A lot of that discrepancy exists because, as I said earlier, they actively want to hide a lot of people and differing opinions from other groups, especially from those extreme, uncompromising hardliners.
Mr. Hassomi, right now, regarding Ghalibaf's fate and his role in these negotiations, there are even many speculations being raised. There are many conflicting reports. Iman Shamsai, head of the Parliament's Communications Center, in response to Ghalibaf's resignation, said that Mohammed Bakr Ghalibaf has not resigned and is diligently engaged in his activities, and that rumors have been spread with the aim of disturbing public opinion, assuming they've really sidelined Ghalibaf from the negotiations. Can negotiations that didn't reach a conclusion with Ghalibaf succeed with someone else, a more hardline person like Jalili?
Well, it's highly interesting, isn't it? The complex issues that were already on the table before have expanded. Now another critical one has been added, the strategic Strait of Hormuz and controlling the Strait of Hormuz. This comes up now after intense negotiations and after, so to speak, assessing if they can successfully sign a contract together. Look, I personally don't see it that way. I see it this way, for example. You can have the exact same discussions about J.D. Vance not going and the ideological differences that might exist within the Trump administration itself regarding the broader issue of war or peace or complex matters currently under discussion.
Oh, but going? Excuse me, sir, I'm interrupting you. J.D. Vance going has a protocol. You know, he can't just go meet with Araghchi. Someone of the stature of Iran's parliament speaker should have gone. And yeah, that's it.
My point wasn't just about people changing or reading into why, for example, J.D. Vance was added at that specific time. Like, it wasn't simply about trusting Wyckoff or Kushner. As for the issues, that there might be political differences, and there is no doubt. Look, deep differences regarding the Islamic Republic's approach to the West have existed and still exist since the beginning of the revolution, shifting from Bazargan to Rafsanjani, Rafsanjani to Khatami, Khatami to Rafsanjani, again after the war, and then, as you know, Rouhani and so on. It remains a debate of confrontation or engagement with the West. And here, well, Jalili is part of the Steadfastness front group, and those are the die-hard revolutionaries, and he takes tougher stances. Javan newspaper had written today, or rather yesterday, that it hadn't talked about 3 issues regarding non-negotiation. It had talked about how we won, that after, for example, America acted against the ceasefire, we stood firm and didn't go. But it wrote that there were 3 critical topics still on the table, and these are absolutely not negotiable. One is the ongoing situation with enriched uranium, one is the issue of Iran's missile range capabilities, and then the vital issue of the future of the Strait of Hormuz. So even in these complex discussions about what issues should be negotiated, in my opinion, these 3 points are still firmly on the table. And before, we used to think that Iran's economy only depended on, well, the JCPOA agreement or a broader deal with the West. Now, Meanwhile, the reality is that the entire world's interconnected economy heavily depends on the safe and secure opening of the Strait of Hormuz. I genuinely do not see these political developments as anything particularly unusual. Naturally, yes, there are notable differences in leadership styles. However, the real question remains whether Jalili's arrival is a definitive sign that those who strictly prioritize aggressive confrontation with the West, those uncompromising die-hard revolutionaries, might actually have the upper hand there right now.
Mr. Ajabi, while we're hearing and it's being reported about many of these rifts within the Islamic Republic, they themselves, at least outwardly on social media and in their statements, talk about cohesion and say we're all working under the leadership of Mojtaba Khamenei. How much do you think these differences really exist on the ground? How much of that can be attributed to psychological warfare by the Americans and Israel, specifically to create divisions within the system's core?
Look, Mr. Farzad, one defining characteristic Ali Khamenei had was his ability to keep all the diverse factions within the Islamic Republic firmly under his cloak, so to speak. This meant that while these groups frequently had intense political conflicts with each other, ultimately, their complex relationships were carefully managed by Khamenei himself through his strategic mediation. Every competing faction consistently considered themselves comfortably close to the inner circles of absolute power. Look, regardless of whether I go back to Mojtaba Khamenei being alive or not, the fact is that Mojtaba Khamenei's team is in charge. Mojtaba Khamenei has had his own specific people over the years. Over these years, he's actually had severe conflicts with certain groups, and these conflicts have become very complicated. For example, one instance was in the Yas holding issue. Another was, for example, the Hossein Tayeb issue. Even now, the conflict between Ali Asghar Hijazi's team and many of these people is significant, which causes many of these individuals, many of these people who are in the power struggle. After all, Mojtaba Khamenei has been influential at the top level of decision-making in the Islamic Republic for at least 20-something years, influencing his father. And he had successfully advanced this ongoing power struggle, and many key figures involved in this political battle were closely aligned with him and his dedicated team. This is largely because Mojtaba Khamenei has carefully cultivated a highly influential core group of loyalists. For example, one prominent member of this inner circle is Hossein Mohammadi, alongside other strategically placed individuals just like him. Interestingly, this intense power struggle is now visibly manifesting even within the ranks of the IRGC itself. I mean, fully unpacking all of this certainly needs much more time, but even within the broader structure of the IRGC, a certain established faction had a lot of deep-seated problems with Mojtaba Khamenei's frequent interventions. Right now, you see, the way the negotiation topic was announced beforehand, the type of ceasefire, the things they're saying, many of them were taken aback. I mean, many of these officials whose guy was saying on TV the night before that nothing had happened, suddenly, for example, they see the issue and it's being hidden from them. This power struggle is immense, but it's true that Mojtaba Khamenei's team still has the upper hand, but it hasn't solidified its position yet. There is another critical issue here too. The Strait of Hormuz, Mr. Farzad. Please pay close attention to what I am saying. The Strait of Hormuz is like a strategic check that was once drawn in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this check, this very check, had to be cashed once. This check almost got cashed, but now it has unfortunately bounced. Our dear friend is absolutely right about this. It heavily affects the fragile economy of the entire world. But they couldn't cash this check. And with these disagreements they had, maybe if they really had some cohesion, instead of this whole mess they created in the Strait of Hormuz and these events, actually, it's the opposite of the story that affects the world economy. They showed themselves as a danger to the whole world. They could have spent this check in a different way, with some deterrent issues, which is exactly their lack of cohesion, which you see from, for example, Zarif's tweet to other events that causes this check to bounce. And what exactly do we mean by this specific metaphor of check bouncing? It is precisely what Donald Trump is doing right now on the global stage. Well, what is truly happening is a complex dynamic. On the one hand, the Islamic Republic undeniably possesses strategic cards to completely mess up the geopolitical game for its adversaries. However, it critically lacks the necessary cards to genuinely build itself up economically or socially. We must recognize that these are two entirely separate issues in diplomacy. In high-stakes negotiations, you might hold disruptive cards that you can actively use to create severe security challenges for the opposing side, or for all the neighboring countries in the region. But conversely, you also desperately need positive, constructive cards that you can actually use to successfully face deep systemic challenges yourself today. For example, when the Islamic Republic launched 2,700 missiles at the UAE, for example, 100 and several hundred at Kuwait, they hit these, and those countries were able to absorb these blows. Now, for example, they can fix their own country, their food supplies, and all that. But on the other hand, you have to see, Mr. Islamic Republic, do you have the capacity to accept your own behavior, this thing where you become a danger to all the people of the world? Do you have a card to play with and endure your own conditions? To be able to prevent the country from the brink of, well, food security, from job security, and all that, which is already past? I highly doubt it.
Mr. Hassami, briefly state if the U.S. military deployment and assets transferring back to the region are exactly the same as before the start of the 40-day war. Do you think, and I know it is not an easy question to answer right now, but in your considered opinion, can Islamabad realistically have any hope of reaching a lasting diplomatic solution? Or is all of this just setting the stage for another devastating war?
Look, even if there's another war, you still need a political solution, whether in the short term or the long term. Right now, everyone is talking about how the Islamic Republic is counting on this war continuing and becoming a war of attrition. Meaning that if this situation continues, and even without deploying ground troops in the region, nothing substantial will be accomplished in the short term. The opposing side knows that the upcoming elections, America's own domestic economic issues, and the mounting pressure on the Trump administration to solve these problems give them a valuable strategic card. They think that if this conflict becomes a prolonged war of attrition, U.S. policy will inevitably change. Therefore, I firmly believe that all sides are forced to compromise. It is not just the Islamic Republic that is forced into this position. Ultimately, America is also forced to find a viable political solution to prevent further regional instability, and inevitably, so is Israel. Now, you might separate the short-term, medium-term, and long-term, but in my opinion, even if another war starts, many major unknowns have now become completely clear after the 38-day war. Both the West's systemic incapacities and the Islamic Republic's incapacities have been exposed, while their actual capabilities have also become clear. Therefore, I strongly think it is only a political solution that can untie this difficult knot, not a destructive military solution from either side.
Thank you both. Aram Hassami, Professor of Political Science at Mary College, and Javed Rajabi, Political Analyst. Attacks on the headquarters of Iranian Kurdistan parties in the Kurdistan region of Iraq are still ongoing, and in the latest of these attacks yesterday, according to local sources, a camp in Sulaymaniyah province was targeted by 2 drones. Simultaneously, 4 drones bombed the headquarters of the Kurdistan Freedom Party on the Erbil border, which resulted in 5 Peshmerga being wounded. Also, a drone in Erbil province was destroyed by a fighter jet of the Kurdistan coalition forces. Khalid Azizi, spokesperson for the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, has joined us. Thank you, Mr. Azizi, for accepting our invitation. How do you generally see the outlook for this ceasefire?
The true outlook for this ceasefire remains completely unclear and obscured by uncertainty, largely because the ongoing conflict has devolved into a grueling war of attrition. In parallel to this physical battle, the diplomatic effort to secure a ceasefire has itself transformed into a frustrating political war of attrition. Naturally, both key players in this complex issue, the United States of America and the Islamic Republic, find themselves facing a profound stalemate. They are deadlocked both in the practical field strategy of continuing the conflict and in figuring out how to reach a viable diplomatic agreement. However, it is crucial to recognize that America and the Islamic Republic are not in completely similar geopolitical situations. It is the Islamic Republic that is vulnerable throughout this entire process. And regardless of the outcome of the current negotiations or ceasefire or war, I think in the future it will again be the Islamic Republic that will be the main loser of this war of attrition, these attrition negotiations, and this attrition agreement and ceasefire.
If the war resumes and continues, do you see a role or a place for Kurdish parties, including your own party, the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, in such a confrontation?
Although we have not been a part of the ongoing US and Israel's war with the Islamic Republic, the deep-rooted struggles of the people of Kurdistan against the oppressive Islamic Republic regime have always existed ever since the 1979 Islamic Revolution of Iran. And the Kurdish people in Iranian Kurdistan in general, and the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran specifically, have been in struggle, and the entire issue of Kurdistan and the issue of democracy in Iran, how to establish democracy and transition from the Islamic Republic regime, the elimination of this regime, should not community. Why? Because both America, Israel, and the international community are pursuing their own interests in how they regulate their relations with the Islamic Republic, whether in wartime, in peacetime, or in conditions of dialogue and negotiation. We too, as the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran and the people of Iranian Kurdistan and all the people of Iran, who unfortunately, well, throughout this entire process, their place is largely unseen, meaning they are absent, because we unfortunately still don't have an alternative that can replace the Islamic Republic regime. But our war, or our struggle against the Islamic Republic regime, will not be subject to these agreements or the future outcome of this war.
In the middle of the war, Mr. Azizi, Mr. Trump said something that was very controversial, especially among Iranians. He said, "I gave weapons to the Kurds, but they didn't deliver them to the people." Do you, in any capacity, have any information on whether these weapons were given to the Kurds, which Kurds they were given to, whether it was on the Iraqi side, on the Iranian side, or who received them?
At least as far as the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran is concerned, those claims are simply not true. We absolutely haven't received any weapons from America. Furthermore, Mr. Trump's recent statements, unfortunately, were very vague, general, and lacked specific context. It is crucial to recognize that there are different parts of Kurdistan spread across the region, and there are several distinct Kurdish parties. America itself previously maintained a very positive relationship with certain Kurdish factions during the intense fight against ISIS, and also armed them. Therefore, we, as the Democratic Party, have definitely not received any such weapons or assistance. And consider the Democratic Party, whose brave Peshmerga forces are a direct result of the enduring resistance of the people of Kurdistan against the Islamic Republic regime over the past few years. Regarding the weapons we've historically had and still have today, well, the Democratic Party and its Peshmerga fighters exactly had those same reliable weapons at that time. Why, after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, did the people of Iranian Kurdistan also arm themselves like the rest of the Iranian people? With the difference that when the Islamic Republic attacked Kurdistan, we defended ourselves, not the claims Mr. Trump made at that time regarding sending weapons and aid to Iranian Kurds. That's not true, and it wasn't like that.
Mr. Azizi, it seems that during the war, the Kurdish parties, at least militarily, showed restraint for whatever reason. And now that there is a ceasefire in these recent weeks, despite the ceasefire, the camps of Iranian Kurdish parties in the Kurdistan region are especially being targeted. Why do you think this is happening?
These attacks weren't new either. Even before the US and Israel's war with the Islamic Republic, whenever the Islamic Republic felt pressured by the people of Kurdistan, or when the struggles of the Iranian people inside Iran reached their peak, it would try to divert public opinion in Iran by attacking Kurdistan, by attacking Kurdish forces, by missile attacks on the headquarters of the Democratic Party leadership and the camps of Iranian Kurdish refugees in Iraq. I think the current situation is exactly a continuation of that same previous policy. Why, during these negotiations they're now having with America, as they say, or even though there's a ceasefire, the Islamic Republic still attacks the camps of Iranian Kurdish refugees and the headquarters of Iranian Kurdish parties. Its goals are that after the war ends, in terms of their relations with Iraq, they want to find a position to put pressure on Iraq so that these areas, or Iraqi Kurdistan, don't remain secure. and the Islamic Republic, as before, is concerned about the Iranian Kurds and the unity of Kurdish parties, and that Iranian Kurdistan is in a good position to confront the Islamic Republic, and in future possibilities of how the war might continue, they still have the potential and capacity to defend themselves against the Islamic Republic. I think this is a package that the Islamic Republic is pursuing so that in the future, after the war ends, or in the future with the possibility of their agreements with America, they can take revenge on the Kurds and also put the Kurdish parties in a worse position by attacking them. This is a policy that I think won't be easy for them to implement because Kurdish parties, especially the Kurdistan Democratic Party, have very deep and enduring historical roots among the resilient people of Kurdistan. We have been tragically targeted by the Islamic Republic's missile attacks in the past. Iranian Kurdistan has also been relentlessly targeted by the Islamic Republic's armed security forces, and they have always turned Iranian Kurdistan into a highly militarized security zone. But our struggles have continued, and in the future, regardless of any potential outcome of the US-Iran diplomatic negotiations, a US-Iran ceasefire, or a US-Iran war, these struggles will absolutely continue. And our policy is that these struggles, with the vital cooperation and coordination of all Iranian people and Iranian organizations and parties, will continue against the Islamic Republic regime as before.
Thank you. Khalid Azizi, Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran spokesperson. The United States Central Command, CENTCOM, announced that for the first time in several decades, 3 of the country's aircraft carriers have been simultaneously deployed in the Middle East. According to CENTCOM, the USS Abraham Lincoln, USS Gerald R. Ford, and USS George H.W. Bush, along with their support ships, are present in the region. According to this report, these 3 carriers collectively have 200 fighter jets and 15,000 sailors and Marines. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of War said an hour ago that Tehran officials have a historic opportunity to reach an agreement, and wasting time is not in their best interest. He warned that the continuation and intensification of the naval blockade on Iran is on the agenda.
President Trump's certainty and decisiveness are completely clear. Again yesterday, he said that we have enough time and we're not in a hurry for an agreement. And I myself have heard him say every day. Iran knows that they still have the chance to choose wisely, as I've said before, to act wisely at the negotiating table and just abandon nuclear weapons and provide the conditions for verification. Or else their entire economy will inevitably collapse, and this straight blockade will remain in place for as long as necessary. Whenever President Trump decides, he alone will determine exactly how long this pressure campaign takes to ensure Iran will never possess a nuclear bomb. Ultimately, the critical choice is entirely theirs to make. However, with this unrelenting economic blockade firmly established, time is simply not on their side.
Farzin Nadimi, a senior research fellow for defense and security affairs at the Washington Institute, is with us from this very city. Mr. Nadimi, even before the ceasefire, the U.S. military posture in the region was heavy. After all, they fought one of the heaviest wars with the Islamic Republic for 40 days. What signal is it sending that a 3rd carrier is coming with nearly 90 new aircraft? Will the U.S.'s setup for the potential continuation of the war be different from the first 40 days?
Hello there. Of course, 3 aircraft carriers are really important. Since 2003, when the U.S.'s full-scale military invasion of Iraq happened, we haven't had 3 aircraft carriers in the Middle East region. But if you remember, even back then, there were these extensive talks that if the United States really wanted to conduct a serious military operation with a lot of operational depth, and maybe even a massive ground component, it would absolutely need to have at least 3 aircraft carriers. I mean, at least 3 full aircraft carrier strike groups deployed in the region. And now we clearly see that this wish of CENTCOM commanders has finally come true. And after a while, which was entirely necessary anyway, for some vital preparations and for those usual logistical processes to happen. For example, the aircraft carrier USS George W. Bush previously had to be rigorously certified for each of its complex systems, each of its operations, and each part of the massive ship. It must get the necessary certification to safely go on a long deployment mission. And this thorough evaluation usually takes between 1 to 2 months. And we saw, well, these essential things finally happened at the same time, and the George Bush set off. the USS Lincoln, which was already strategically positioned in the region, and the Gerald Ford, which everyone always expected to finally leave the area because its deployment had gotten really long, surprised us all. We saw that not only did its ongoing mission not end, but the massive ship crossed the Suez Canal. It has now come directly to the Red Sea, where it's been given a super important defensive mission. That objective is to strictly guard Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coast, especially the critical Yanbu oil terminal, which is now, you could say, the only functioning oil export center in the entire region.
Let me just open a quick side note here, Mr. Nadimi. If it was that safe for the Gerald Ford to pass through the Red Sea, pass through Egypt, cross the Suez Canal, and come into the Red Sea, why did the H.W. Bush take a different route and go to South Africa?
Well, it is generally considered safe in terms of passing through the Suez Canal and staying strictly within the northern Red Sea region, positioned safely north of Yemen's maritime border. If the USS George W. Bush had to, or if command decided for the carrier to enter the region via the Suez Canal, it would have had to cross the entire Red Sea, navigate the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and enter the Gulf of Aden. Throughout this whole volatile area, it would have been continuously within range of Houthi missiles and attack drones, and that is probably not a strategic risk they decided to take. And so it was ultimately decided that the George would come all the way around Africa and be strategically positioned in an area where it could practically play a highly effective role in ongoing naval blockade operations. So when considering the broader picture, what kind of measurable impact can a concentrated force of 2 or 3 aircraft carriers actually have? Anyway, you can look at this tactical situation in 3 distinct ways. For starters, they can easily divide up their primary missions. These specialized air groups that are stationed on each of these massive aircraft carriers can be given specific tailored missions. For instance, one dedicated group can play a critical role in supporting the Strait of Hormuz mission, seamlessly providing continuous air cover for delicate operations to free detained commercial ships in the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. As I previously mentioned, deploying another aircraft carrier strike group offers significant strategic advantages. It can effectively protect the entire region of Saudi Arabia, securing both western Saudi Arabia and eastern Saudi Arabia against the growing threat of Iranian drones. Meanwhile, the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier group can still remain fully dedicated to carrying out its offensive operations deep inside Iranian territory. Alternatively, commanders can decide to divide the workload by time. For example, one carrier conducts missions for half of the 24-hour cycle, and the other carrier handles the remaining 12 hours. This coordinated strategy ensures that they can maintain a relentless 24-hour pressure operation on Iran. And anyway, considering the current geopolitical climate, these are the realistic expectations that one can have, ensuring that these formidable aircraft carriers can fully make the most of their strategic presence in the region. It certainly seems that with the USS George W. Bush finally arriving and the Gerald Ford's operational position now being firmly stabilized, a pivotal moment is rapidly approaching. Whether it happens this weekend or next weekend, we could finally expect that, given the complex diplomatic negotiations that are currently happening or entirely stalled, definitive command decisions will soon be made to officially restart direct combat operations and military engagements.
Mr. Nadimi, I want to play remarks from Ahmed Reza Radan, Iran's police chief, about the American pilot rescue operation. He states that, contrary to reports, the Americans came to Iran with another objective, and they also failed.
I mean, where in the entire world would several massive 1330s, multiple helicopters, the Hermes, and all that expensive equipment come together for just one pilot?
And why this specific spot? Yeah, one day we showed on the map that the place where it was announced that the plane had actually crashed, and they probably should have been looking for it there, is at least about 140-150 kilometers away from the spot.
I am genuinely surprised by the expert military analysts in America and Europe. It is baffling how they can hear this narrative and blindly accept that an entire strike force came with several giant 3130 aircraft and multiple helicopters just to capture one single pilot. Usually, if that is the case, it means an immediate emergency landing right where the incident happened, and they quickly got out safely. Originally, they wanted to announce a major surprise to the public, and they had everything fully ready to declare ultimate victory.
We're still with Farzin Nadimi. What do you make of what he said, Mr. Nadimi? Is he right in military terms?
Look, during the Iran-Iraq War, Mr. Radan was probably a low-ranking Basiji, so he probably doesn't remember much about what happened when Iranian pilots were shot down in Iraqi territory and the chance came up for them to be rescued. All the refueling planes, F-14 air support, Army aviation helicopters, Army aviation Cobras, when the chance and conditions came up, even by taking the risk of Iraqi attacks and Iraqi air defense, would enter Iraqi territory, even going deep into Iraqi territory, just to rescue that Iranian pilot. When a dedicated military force truly values the life of a downed pilot, it will willingly go through hell and high water just to save its own personnel. This commitment is especially critical in a situation where the issue is heavily scrutinized politically. In the context of rescuing isolated personnel, President Bush had to clearly show his supporters in the United States that our nation deeply values the lives of its military personnel and will do absolutely everything necessary to safely bring them home. And the CIA started a covert operation back when these pilots had landed in Iran, especially when they were looking for the missing second pilot. Their goal was to deceive Iran and the forces of the Islamic government into thinking that the operation to rescue the downed plane and save the stranded pilot was actually happening in a completely different geographic area. Meanwhile, they had quietly prepared resources to rescue the pilot in another spot. Of course, at some point, they realized this deception, and apparently forces try to swiftly reach the Tehran area. The presence of American forces to get there, which according to the confession of the Islamic government officials themselves, they attacked the American plane and the American drone and destroyed all of them. Anyway, it seems that because the landing zone and that staging area, or the landing area for American facilities, was near Isfahan's nuclear site, well, these scenarios exist. I also heard that they said that in fact this was an operation to extract 60% enriched uranium material from Iran. But this critical point should also be considered, that the uranium, it seems, is located in secure tunnels, where tons of compacted soil have been used to block its entrances. For this reason, it requires heavy excavation equipment to work there for several days or weeks just to open it up, and only then can they go down and see if there is enriched uranium there or not. This was a completely impractical task under those hostile circumstances, and it seemed that yes, a covert operation deep inside Iranian territory was carried out to rescue the pilot, with a very successful intelligence deception operation. But, well, because of a few unexpected issues that, well, weren't foreseen regarding the plane's flight, that massive A330 plane simply couldn't take off, and as a result, alternative smaller planes had to be quickly dispatched to the area. There's even a circulating video of them hurriedly loading these stranded individuals and essential personnel onto those smaller, lighter planes and taking them safely away from there, and then entirely destroying the original plane. All these complicated things happened in real time. Much later, the gentleman realized a mess. Later, the gentleman came and thanked the aftermath, and now it's natural for them to tell exaggerated stories and try to make heroes out of it.
Mr. Nadimi, yesterday I sent you an insightful article from CSIS. It was talking about how, during the recent 40-day war, America's many critical pieces of military equipment, including its THAAD and Patriot systems, and even its Tomahawk cruise missiles, were allegedly reduced by something close to half. How accurate do you realistically think these specific assessments are? Can the United States Army, the world's foremost superpower, really be weakened to this extent in a mere 40-day war? Or are there additional data points that aren't necessarily available to the public, meaning this current picture is fundamentally incomplete?
Well, when considering naval strike capacity, each aircraft carrier and each Virginia-class submarine can carry up to 125 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Similarly, each of these versatile Arleigh Burke-class destroyers can have up to 70 or 80 cruise missiles equipped. Now, usually they carry fewer to make room for air defense interceptors. Overall, if we look closely at the current environment, perhaps a significant number of the weapons, or those critical missile rounds that were available to American forces operating throughout the CENTCOM region have already been used. There is talk of roughly 1,000 Tomahawk missiles, between 1,500 to 2,000 Patriot PAC-3 missiles, and also advanced FOD systems being heavily utilized. Yes, it certainly seems that these vital military capabilities have been used at an exceptionally high consumption.
And naturally, America's military inventory has fallen below the officially desired level, considering that production and replenishment cycles take years to fully complete. This is especially concerning if a war, for example, were to happen in the Pacific with China. But the situation is still not so severe that it is truly dangerous or sets off alarm bells. Furthermore, it seems that with the acceleration of contracts the Pentagon has signed with major weapons manufacturers, this pressing supply issue will soon be resolved.
Thank you. Farzin Nadim, thank you very much. And thank you for being a loyal viewer of 24.